And she went on to share with me that everything that represented the quality of her life was falling apart because of the past medical history diseases that I saw in her chart. It challenged me to ask myself a question when she asked me, "Can you help me?" And thinking back through the reams of pharmacology, I realized that I was not trained to help somebody put their life back together again. I went on a personal learning journey that helped me to understand the power of lifestyle, and even more, the power of food to regenerate our bodies. And then as I began to understand the power of food to regenerate a complex biologic system that is irreducibly complex, I also began to think through the amazing connections of our plate to the world that is around us. And it challenged me to begin thinking more holistically about the recommendations that I was giving as a physician. And I began to understand that everything is connected. And that, as Chief Seattle said here, all things are connected like the blood that unites us. We do not weave the web of life, we are merely a strand in that web. And whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. And I would also add to this that whatever we do to ourselves, we also do to the web of life. And this is perhaps more impactful when we consider that our plate every single day is a part of this inextricable web that links our food choices to the soil, to the people that are growing our food, to the way the food is produced, to the deforestation of land, and all the way downstream to the garbage and food waste that are produced, as we'll talk about shortly. I began to realize that the 100 bites a day that are consumed by each individual, the 700 to 900 kilograms that are consumed by every one of us every single year, have an incredible impact on the resources of this planet. There's an incredible impact on the degeneration of our current planet and our resources, but there's also an amazing regenerative capacity by choosing differently what we put on our plate to begin regenerating these systems around the world. So in the next few minutes, I just want us to begin rethinking what's on our plate. Why do we eat what we eat? How does that food impact our bodies? How does our body and our health impact those directly around us? How does that food impact the supply chain upstream and downstream? And how does our food choices impact the world that we're storing for the next generation? So just kind of by the numbers really quickly, when we think about the westernized plate, that our food system has changed dramatically in the last 100 years. We don't have time to talk about the complexities of that, but we have gone essentially from 5 pounds of sugar in 1890 to 140 pounds of sugar and sweeteners per person per year. And so how has this affected our healthcare system? In the United States, the current estimated healthcare budget is $5.3 trillion. 80% of the healthcare budget is related to lifestyle diseases. More than 40% is related to the food that we put on our plate. It's an unsustainable trend. The toxins that are in our food, we use about 4 million metric tons of herbicides and pesticides every year in our food to produce food. But that has a dramatic impact on the health of the soil. It's in the soil and around the soil. It runs off into the waterways and affects the life in the waterways. As we all know, it runs down the rivers and comes out into the ocean where we have massive growing dead zones around the world. And it affects the algae blooms that we're seeing in rivers and lakes and oceans around the world. We have incredible deforestation that's taking place. 420 million hectares of land have been deforested to grow livestock. 1.2 trillion animals every single year are produced for food. And more land is deforested. We have a growing amount of waste that's produced. We have essentially more than 132 kilograms of food waste that is produced by every individual that goes to the dumps, produce greenhouse gas, and it's estimated that the greenhouse gas production from food waste is 8 to 10% of total greenhouse gas production, which is 5 times more than the emissions from the aviation sector. And this doesn't include the municipal waste, which is being burdened by 83% of the waste is related to food packaging. As we know, we're overfishing. From 1950 to the current date, 90% of the fish stock has been overfished. And what's amazing is 40% of the fish that are being collected are being fed to animals, which is ridiculous. We're also 2.2 trillion fish, wild fish, are caught every year for food. And the amazing loss of biodiversity that we see around the world, 69% of the loss of biodiversity in wild habitats globally, and 94% loss of wildlife species in the Latin American and Caribbean region. This was the largest study done to date, which looked at 38,700 farms and represents 90% of what we eat. Richard Moore from Oxford said this: agriculture is a sector that spans all the multitude of environmental problems. And you can see that 80% of our farmland is used for livestock and produces only 18% of the calories and 37% of the protein, a disproportionate use of land and resources for food for humanity. And we see the impact in healthcare. And you can see here, diet is the leading cause of death and disability globally. And the dichotomy is that in healthcare today, in medical school, less than 1% of the time in education is spent educating healthcare providers about the food and lifestyle that are the #1 cause of death and disability globally. And you can see the statistics: 79% of people are overweight or obese, 66% of the population takes at least one medication, 60% of people have prediabetes, 40% of all people have diagnosis of cancer in their lifetime, 33% of teens and children are overweight or obese, and 25 to 43% of our children are taking medications. And this is not normal. This is common, but it's not normal. But the good news is, as we circle to the end, biologic systems can regenerate themselves in ways that are far beyond our imagination. And this was the surprise to me. When I started helping my patients regenerate their lives, I was shocked at how quickly their bodies recover. Hippocrates said that healing is not just a matter of time, it is also a matter of opportunity. And when we partner with biologic systems, be it a human, a mangrove, a waterway, I was speaking with Corey last night, the wetlands, when we partner with the system and we provide the right inputs for that system, regeneration happens more quickly than we can imagine. And this is an example of regeneration. So currently it takes 2 football fields to feed one family in standard American diet. But as we shift to more plants on our plate, and this doesn't have to be plant exclusive or any of those black and white dietary discussions, but as we move to more plant-powered plates, 2 football fields feed a family of 14 people. And we can also see if we shift to more plant-based plates, we can return 5 billion football fields to forest. And then just in the interest of time, this is again the regenerative capacity of a plant-based plate. And we can see the plant-powered benefits here. We can reduce land use by up to 76%, again returning that to forest and living land. We can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 28%, reduce water usage by up to 54%. We enhance biodiversity, and we reduce pressure on important marine systems, allowing the systems to begin regenerating themselves. And as we wind down, I wanted to share the story of a friend of mine. This is Marcy Madrid, who was the Vice President of Population Health in Midland, Texas, who was diagnosed with rapidly progressive multiple sclerosis. And her story is not just an individual story, but it tells us that there's an opportunity for biologic systems to regenerate. This is an MRI of Marcy's cervical cord, her spinal cord, and her neck, and we can see here that there's white in the spinal cord, which is inflammation in the spinal cord. This is November of 2014 when I met her during a grand rounds at the hospital. 7 months later, after transitioning her diet, all of her inflammation in her spinal cord is resolved, and similarly in her brain, the huge lesion in the frontal part of her brain has completely resolved, and 15 years later now, Marcy is still symptom-free. And so when a biologic system regenerates, it's not just the single system that changes, but as was said earlier, regeneration is procreation. And so Marcy returned to her role in her family, but she also returned to her role in her healthcare system. And she began to create new systems because she had regenerated herself. They started a not-for-profit. We started a conference which began educating 700 people a year. We opened a lifestyle medicine center. We began doing community gardens and educating the students in the schools. And so the single regenerative opportunity in her life spread to the entire community. And so as we can begin to see, there's this incredible halo opportunity around the transition, what we make a decision to put on our plate every single day. And plants, which are grown in regenerative soil, through the care and cultivation of the biologic systems that are around that soil, creates this incredible opportunity to provide food for people that regenerates their bodies, and as they regenerate, they begin naturally regenerating the systems that are around them. And through a plant-powered plate, we can begin transforming one choice, one plate at a time, a ripple of transformation from the cells in our body to the systems, to the individuals and the families and the communities, from boardrooms to governments, and from people to planetary health, as we begin shifting what's on our plate every single day. And why do we do this? Because we've lost sight, as we've been trained by our system to think reductionistically and compartmentalize. And we've forgotten to step back and look holistically at systems and ask the question, why am I here? My life is meant to be, part of it is stewarding the resources that are around me for the next generation, so that I can return this earth, that I can return nature, that I can return a healthcare system in better condition than when I stepped into this planet. And so I want to invite all of us to begin sharing a message of stewardship as we're talking about regenerative systems around the world, and encouraging people to step out of the consumer mindset to one of relational partnership with nature and the world around us. So I thank you for your time, and I'll be around if you have any questions. If you want more information, you can scan this barcode. I want to thank Eleanor Sharif, my friend, for bringing me and inviting me, and Juan Carlos also for the opportunity to be a part of this amazing event, and introduce you to this idea of the power of the plate and the regenerative opportunity that we have 3 times a day. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.